never make a decision based on the worst behaviour or the worst option, because it will always be the wrong one.
Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I'm here with, could be argued, two of the most powerful women in the Lib Dems. Now, they probably don't see it like that, but actually they are very, very important. We have the two new leaders of two county councils in the country. We have, first of all, Amanda Hopgood from Durham. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, John.
And we have Liz Leffman from Oxfordshire. How are you doing, Liz?
Hello, John. Doing fine, thank you.
Now, I suppose the first thing to ask both of you is, how are you doing, actually? What have been the last few months been like? Should we go with you first, Amanda?
Yeah, a bit of a a lot of a whirlwind. Went into the elections hoping that Labour's majority would be reduced. They ended it up significantly reduced, and the council was in no overall control. So with 3 weeks discussing with the rest of the groups, we agreed to form a joint administration made up of 4 groups, 2 independent groups, the Conservatives and ourselves. And the rest, as they say, is history. Here we are, almost 100 days in.
And we're gonna get into some of these election groupings, not election groupings, beg your pardon, some of these administration groupings coming up. But Liz, I suppose for you, this is all. You kind of, obviously most people will know you from the Whitney by-election, where everyone thought, people from all across the country came to help you, and
yeah,
it was. It was one of those things when we saw that you had actually got elected. And I don't know, because people from Preston came down to help with Whitney. We just went, "Oh, that's so good. Liz is just the best." So how exciting? how busy has your few years been?
Well, actually, I've been a county councillor now for 4 years, so fairly busy, but not as busy as the last few weeks, I can tell you. I don't think I've been this busy in about 20 years, to tell you the truth. And I have to say, it came as a bit of a shock, just how much you do as a council leader and a council of this size, and just how much it encompasses. And I have been having some of the most interesting conversations, not just with people in the council, but actually beyond. There's some very exciting things going on in Oxfordshire, and I'm sure there's a great deal more we can do to promote all of that and get more investment into the county, although I know the focus is going to be on more deprived areas, but there are such exciting things going on here. I'm hoping we can get our voice out there.
Brilliant. And just so all listeners and viewers might not know, so there are several different types of councils, but in 2-tier authorities, such as the one I'm in and such as you guys now control. So the counties are the upper tier authority, generally get the vast majority of council tax. So I can only use my example. So in Lancashire, Lancashire gets around 70% of the council tax, whereas the boroughs get about 16%, and the odds and sods go to the police and fire, and deal with the big ticket issue items such as health and highways is massive, social care, education. These all come in under the county seat. So they are really the biggest authorities we kind of have come under the counties. So, right, I think maybe we should just explain some of the political manoeuvres that had to be done. So, Amanda, you kind of alluded, but should we do you first? So what happened was, what's really interesting, your point of view, is you're not even the second largest party, the Lib Dems. So you're on 17, the Conservatives on 24, and Durham County Council had been Labour for 100 and something odd years. Is that correct?
102 years.
Yeah, so you were the first female leader and the first non-Labour leader of Durham County Council.
Yes.
So how? Yeah, go on.
And in terms of Durham, we aren't 2-tier; we're unitary.
Oh, right.
Which is why our budget and everything. So we deal with everything.
Yeah.
75% of County Durham is rural, but we have got the big city areas as well. In terms of coming together, we've got 126 councillors, so huge unitary authority. I've been really grateful for the LGA support that we've had, because I think, and I would recommend that to anyone who finds themselves in our position, take all the support that you can get, because like Liz says, I'm not sure I've ever worked as many hours in my life, even when I was full-time employed. Before, I've been a councillor for 15 years, and for the last 13, it's been my full-time job. and 8 as leader of the opposition, but the scale is enormous, I have to say. And like Liz, the people who you meet, you go home on a night and you think, wow, has that really happened to me today? Have I actually done that? And then at 10 o'clock at night, you get a text and say, can you quickly sign this letter off? And you open it up and it's to the Prime Minister. And you're thinking, how's that happened? You know, it is really, the scale that you're working on is enormous. And I think just even learning this new job, but all the stuff that is also happening at the moment politically that we're being asked to look at, as well as learning a new job. And like I said, it's 102 years that there's been one controlling party in County Durham. And if we go back to, this is how much we were kept in the dark. In 2013, they held 96 of the 126 seats. So that's how far they've fallen. But in that time, the opposition were never included in anything. So it is literally learning from scratch.
Yeah. And Liz, yours is more of a kind of, I don't want to say traditional no overall control, but I think the late Conservatives got 22 councillors, you got 21, so it was very close either way, and then you've got support from both the Greens and the Labour Party to form an administration. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, that's almost correct. In actual fact, the Conservatives had 21 and we have 21. And the reason they had 22 was because there was a mistake made at the election count in Banbury. And one of the Labour councillors was told that he'd lost her seat. But as of today, we now have 21 Conservatives, 21 Lib Dems and Labour. So the total alliance is now 40 members.
Right.
And we started off at the beginning of the process when we knew we had a significantly larger number of seats than before, because we went from 13 to 21. And we'd also had an agreement with the Greens during the election period. So we knew that we were going to form an alliance with them. So that was fairly straightforward. So we had 24 members of the Green Lib Dem Alliance, which was, that gave us the basis to be able to say that we could form an administration. So Labour was, and we asked Labour to come along with us. And I have to say that at first we weren't sure which way Labour would go. But they decided that they did want to be part of our alliance, which is great. And actually, there are some good people in that group. And we've got some new councillors who are now members of the cabinet. We've got a mixed cabinet, which is very good. We seem to be working extremely well together at the moment. I'm getting on very well with my deputy leader, I must say. We've formed a good personal relationship, which I think is really, really important if you're going to keep the coalition going. I hesitate to use the word coalition. We prefer to say alliance. And I think, generally speaking, the sort of way that the alliance has formed itself has so far been very successful. But like Amanda, I find myself astonished on a day-to-day basis at what we're doing, and like you, Amanda, I'm writing letters to people that I would never have dreamt of having any connections with, and you realise that actually you really do have the power to do an enormous amount of good. And what I find really surprising is how little the Conservative administration actually did with that power. That's what I find most extraordinary. I've just come off a call with a couple of people who run the Innovation Hub that the County Council has been running now for a long time, but which is almost totally unknown. And yet they are doing some amazing work. And the Conservatives have simply never used that to move things forward. I mean, they've been doing work on stuff like, how we can pool electricity across the county, how we can reduce our carbon footprint through transport, all sorts of things that we knew nothing about from the Conservatives. And yet that fits so perfectly with what we want to do as an administration. So there's a huge amount of exploration to be done, and a huge number of connections to be created, so that we can actually take forward what it is that we want to do. And we're very clear about what we want to do. Actually, we've had some very good meetings to discuss our objectives. We've got some very clear objectives. We're going to be putting forward a new budget very soon, a new corporate plan. So yeah, I think it's very exciting, very dynamic, and we've got lots of support, I would say, from officers. who are quite pleased to see a new administration come along.
Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Prater Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Prater Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Prater Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Prater Rains website at praterrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats. This podcast has been sponsored by the Katora Coffee Club, the UK's most environmentally friendly coffee club. There are over 400 independent roasters in the UK, each one crafting coffee in their own unique style. Katora Coffee Club works with some of the best to take you on a voyage of coffee discovery. The Katora Coffee Club delivers ethically sourced and independently roast coffee directly to your door. Each month you'll receive between 2 and 4 bags of coffee and their monthly extract magazine. Even better for Lib Dem podcast listeners, use the code BETTERCOFFEE to save 5% on subscriptions and gift boxes for a limited time only. All Katora Coffee Club boxes are carbon negative and offset the CO2. So why not do some good, enjoy some great coffee and check out the website www.katoracoffeeclub.com. Now, back to the podcast. And I suppose it just kind of highlights the issue that the best type of democracy is one that refreshes itself. I mean, if you have, like Amanda had up in Durham, basically one party rule for vast numbers of years, it means, and you see it in councils all up and down the country, some councils get very comfortable and just coast. And actually, this sort of change in dynamic can really spur an area on. And Amanda, I'd love to know what kind of, how you're dealing going forward, because I mean, Liz has just mentioned there about budgets. Now that, as we all know, that's the crunch issue. That's when fault lines start appearing. It's to do with money. Oh, I want this to happen to in my division, etc. So are you, like Liz, already thinking, right, okay, how are we going to deal with the big crunch items?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously going to have lots of financial pressures, just like every other council, and we don't have the capacity in County Durham for the council tax. So the government tell us to raise council tax by 2%. Yeah. 75% of our properties are Band A, and on top of that, we have quite a lot who don't pay council tax at all because of the deprivation areas and also high social need. So our budgets are always going to be under pressure, but we do a lot around, we have something called area action partnerships, and we all have as councillors neighbourhood budgets. And the council had agreed to invest some money in towns and villages. But again, one of the things that we've come in and done is that we want to start seeing some action. The Labour Party were very good about talking about things, but never actually doing it. So we've been talking about the towns and villages and how we're going to invest in them for the last 3 years. The money's been sat in the budget and never been spent. So within our first cabinet, we gave £10,000 to every ward member so that they could do something this year in their patch so that every area of the county sees something. And I think that's really important. We've got other strategies that have been discussed for years. Again, we have a big leisure strategy coming up. And what we've said is we want to see some work before the end of this year start on that, because we talk about it and nothing happens. And one of the big things that I'm trying to change culturally, and I'm sure this happens in other councils, is to develop a can-do approach. If I hear again, we can't do this, or something, or we can't do that, why can't, well, we've never done it before. That doesn't mean you can't do it. I want to exhaust every avenue of why we can't do it before I'll accept that it's something that can't happen. And it's just changing that whole thing about, right, actually, this is what we'd like to do. You tell us how we can deliver it.
Yeah.
Rather than tell us why we can't.
Yeah, and it's that's a real obstacle across all levels of local government. You find that again. My former leader, Bill Shannon, who is retired now, he used to say to me exactly like that. If he used to say, if I pay for a lawyer, I say to them, okay, I want to get something done. Tell me how to do it. They don't say, actually, there's no chance. Never mind, because that's just not the way it works. But there is that mindset sometimes where, well, like you say, we've done it for 20 years like this. Okay, well, what's stopping you? What's stopping you from changing it? You guys obviously have talked about ways forward. Now, one of the truly terrifying things from a county perspective is some of the costs that are coming down the road. And there's no way hiding. You mentioned, Amanda, all local authorities are struggling financially, but where counties and unitaries have a problem is social care.
Absolutely.
There's no way. It is a huge financial time bomb waiting to hit, and we can see it year on year out. The demands on it are getting more. So, Liz, how do people know what's coming? Do you think, or do you think suddenly there'll be a cliff edge, and suddenly it will be all over the news everywhere?
Yes, I mean it's been coming at us slowly for the last few years. We know that we've got a crisis on our hands. We absolutely do. And one of the problems that we have this year, we're in a slightly different position from Durham, because, as Amanda said, they've got a lot of Band D houses and a lot of people who don't pay council tax. We're in a slightly different position in that we don't have that problem. We've got houses in higher bands. We've got people who can afford to pay more. And one of the things that we were told we could do last year was to raise council tax by 5% in order to pay for social care, which would have raised £8 million of revenue that could have gone into that budget. But the Conservatives decided not to, and they did it for electoral reasons. We know now that actually they decided to put it up by 2% instead of 5%. We could have had that extra £8 million. It would have been slightly, the 8 million was the 3% that we didn't get, and they thought they could actually do it by putting up council tax a little bit this year, winning the election, and then putting up again next year. So we're in the position now where we're going to be saying, well, we have to put that council tax up next year, come what may, and we're going to have to make a very good case for it to people. But I think we are beginning to see that the government is beginning to think about social care, but they're not thinking about it in the right way. They're talking about putting a cap on how much people have to pay if they have to go into a care home, for example. But actually the big money is in younger adults with disabilities, learning disabilities, etc., who need to live independently but need that support. And there are a growing number of people who are coming through. And we've got a wonderful national health system which has saved the lives of many small children, but those children need support as they grow into adulthood. And nobody is recognising that pressure. That is going to be a massive pressure on all councils. And we've already seen actually how Send, the transport budget for Send, that's just being shoved into a little account somewhere on the side, which the government is saying you don't have to absorb into your budget. We'll pay for it somehow. But there's no information coming as to how that's going to be dealt with. And the real fear is that we will eventually be told that's got to go back into your budgets and be dealt with by the council. So it's a really precarious position that we're facing, really precarious. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, well, there are many things that we want to do that do not fall into the topic of social care. We want to improve transport. We want to have more active travel, etc. We have to find ways of financing those, but we cannot do that at the expense of social care. So it is a big conundrum, and it's going to be a big problem for us to find that money.
Amanda?
Yeah, totally agree with what Liz says. One of the main issues that we face is the children's budget. That's huge and way underfunded. But I think looking at it as a bigger picture, one of the things we've already written to government about, and I'm sure most other councils have, is the fair funding review, and to be getting a settlement figure that's more than 1 year, because they want everyone to plan, but how can you plan when you only get your settlement figure and you don't get it until December, if you're lucky? So we're actually being asked to plan, make commitments to spending, invest in people, but without any idea of what it's likely to be, or that you could have some of it cut significantly at the drop of a hat. So that's really one of the biggest challenges, I think, yes, we're always going to have funding pressures. That's not going to go away. And post-COVID, it's like there's the potential that it can get worse rather than better. But at least give us half a chance to be able to deal with it by letting us know what we're going to have so that we can plan. Because if you can plan, then you've got time to put things in place that you need to, if you need to make savings, etc. But just getting it dropped on you at the last moment is really difficult.
And it also, where the Lib Dems have talked about this for a very long time, we like evidence-based approaches, and actually there's no point in short-term kind of fixes. You want long-term kind of goals. And to do that, like you said, you've got to be able to plan it. You've got to know that your feet aren't going to be pulled out from under you at any point. And so how councils are supposed to do that is beyond me. And I mean, it's an interesting time now, because obviously the Conservatives were very much looking at reorganisation of councils. That looks like it's dead in the water now. I just don't, there seems to be no buy-in at all, and Robert Jenrick's kind of stopped. So the councils that, like Preston, for example, is within 2 years, Preston's run out of money. That's where it is. And I know there's a lot of councils like that. So, and the big thing was, well, will reorganisation come in, and then it's almost like wipe the slate clean. But if that's not happening, something's got to be done to protect the councils, or something's got to change and give us some long-term security. Otherwise, what can we do?
Well, I agree with you completely on that. And I think one of the other frustrations is that when it comes to some of the capital expenditure that we need to make, for example, in our infrastructure, we have to bid into pots all the time.
Yeah.
So there's no certainty that we're going to get the money. So we may have a long-term strategy for example, building cycle paths, improving our bus services, etc. We may want to do that, which is something we absolutely want to do. But because we are then required to bid into a pot in competition with other authorities, we have no way of knowing whether we can actually finance all the things that we want to do. And what's worse is we then have to spend money on actually putting those bids together in the first place without any security of knowing we're going to get the money back. It is completely insane. I mean, the way in which it's being done is just so short-sighted. And I think it's very interesting how much local democracy has been eroded over the last, well, I would say probably 30 or 40 years, actually. I think all governments have been responsible for this. There is absolutely no appreciation in central government of what local government is actually there to do. But government cannot deliver what it has to deliver without local government. Yeah. But there's a complete breakdown of understanding of what this is all about. And I just find it very depressing that, that we're still in the same position as we were, say, 10, 15 years ago. And all we're being asked to do is to cut our expenditure. Mm-hmm. And yet we've got much bigger pressures than ever before. So while it's very exciting to be in the position that I'm in, and Amanda, I'm sure, would agree, it's also quite stressful to know that actually what we would love to do is not necessarily something that we're going to be able to achieve with any great ease. And the difficulty is explaining to people why it is that we can't do it. Mm-hmm. That's the real difficulty.
Yeah, and everything comes with strings attached. So within, and Liz, you're probably the same, within our first week of office, we were sat down with officers having to make a decision on level and up bids.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
yep.
That in itself was like, wow, this is the first time we had any information on it. But the level and up bid the council has to provide match funding to go with it. So this isn't free money. Yes, we've put a bid in for 20 million, but we've got to find £6 million of capital to add to it. And that's one of 6 constituents that we have in County Durham. So you times that, and then it's like you said, it's the officer time to bring these plans to fruition, bring them to the stage that they can be submitted, and then how do you deliver them on top of that? So it is significant, and most of the officers are all from the same department, so it's all regeneration, so everything is being funneled into one area. And Liz is absolutely spot on about national government not appreciating how local government runs. So we're getting huge pressure around devolution and the mayoral model. Now, they've announced county deals, which we have put an expression of interest in, but says it has to have a governance change. Well, actually, what they would be looking at is we have a leader in cabinet system, and that's a 4-year rotation because we're all up every 4 years. So an elected mayor would then have a mayor with a different cabinet, but from the same people, because we're one unitary authority. And this is supposed to be rationalising and saving money. Well, it doesn't work. But we go back to the situation of, that's all we know. But that wouldn't work for County Durham, because we would have a mayor running in conjunction with the leader. Yes, it'd have 2 different functions, but it could all be done by the council because it's the same authority. So it goes back to, you need to understand that one size doesn't fit all, but you also need to understand how it works and how it operates. And
yes.
Until someone can get to grips with that, we're going to really struggle.
And of course, it's very different again when you've got a 2-tier system.
Yeah.
And actually, we've looked at this letter from Robert Jenrick about the county deal and kind of gone, well, we've looked at this before, and it's going to be difficult to get agreement across the various districts.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we just said, well, we're not going to bother with this time around, because I have little faith that anything much is actually going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to put officers under pressure to write a new report when we haven't got any guarantee that it's all going to come off and we're going to get more money out of it. And my view is, well, until they can tell me, until they can give me some guarantees that it's going to be worth putting the effort in. Because I agree, Amanda, it's not just about the money that you spend, the time and effort that you put into the bids. It's the revenue thereafter to actually, because they don't seem to understand. They give you the capital, but then you've got to find the revenue in order to be able to pay the people who can actually spend that capital.
Which is where
it is so completely
yeah.
not sensible. I mean, you do wonder what these people were doing in real life, before they became ministers, that they can have such a distorted view of the way the world works. But no, it's deeply frustrating. But having said that, there are glimmers of hope. I mean, we have put in several bids recently for quite substantial amounts of money to do things like increase the number of cycle lanes around various parts of the city, for example, and to get electric buses into the city and so on. So there are little glimmers of hope there that we might get some money to do some of these things. But you're right. I mean, it's very hand to mouth, and it's very disorganized. And the other thing too, by the way, is that what I'm quickly learning is that, I mean, we had a situation where Number 10 were interested in doing something with us, and there was a particular advisor who was working with us on it, but they didn't actually bother to speak to the Treasury or DFT about it, and so the whole thing fizzled out because the Treasury said no. I mean, there's just no communication between the various departments of government, which is part of the problem.
It's good to know that the chaotic scenes in government aren't just front-facing, they're also run deep as well.
No, they do indeed. They all work in their own little silos.
But the problem, I mean, we've talked about some of the concerns here, but something's got to change. A lot of these, we have seen councils, I'm forgetting what it's called now, but some of the councils have declared themselves just not able to continue. And so you guys will know, it's like a Section 45 or something.
Yeah,
it happened to Northampton, didn't it?
That's right, yes. It's Section 103 or something. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, yes. Yeah, that's why we have a partnership in Oxfordshire with Cherwell District Council, because they were part of Northamptonshire, but then they had to come under Oxfordshire because Northamptonshire went into special measures or whatever you call it.
Yeah. But at some point the government, because I forget, a lot of counties are still Conservative controlled. Like here in Lancashire, Conservative controlled county. These authorities with lots of Tory influence in them. I'm going to have to say to the Tories in government, we can't continue. And that, and it might give me as an opposition leader lots of ammunition to have a go at them. But actually what we want is to make sure Lancashire and every other area has enough money to do social care issues, to start investing again in youth offending units or whatever else that has had to go by the side over the last few years. But they've got to do it. I don't understand how the government can possibly delay it, because it's not sustainable at the moment.
Yeah, and it's right. It's lovely to have these projects and capital investment, but it's the revenue that you need to run the day-to-day services.
Yeah.
an area quickly becomes derelict if you grass cuttings every 3 weeks. And if you can keep an area looking good, then people will take pride in it, and it will be easier to keep it that way. You can see yourself as you drive around the country, the councils who haven't invested in things like the clean and green initiatives and different types of recycling and things like that, and highways. But it's that revenue cost that you need, and therefore that it's those budgets that we need some kind of confidence and some forward thinking and longer term planning, instead of just ad hoc, this is what you're getting this year. And even if they can only do it on an annual basis, give us more than 6 weeks notice of when you have to approve the budget, because you can't set a council budget in 6 weeks.
No.
It's the best will in the world.
And do we think we have to have a mindset change in the country? I've always had the feeling that the government has got, for proper local government kind of powers, then the government and people have to accept that some authorities will make mistakes, and but the majority will perform better if they're given more power. But there'll be some council run by, I mean, I want to talk about the Liverpool Labour group at the moment, which has obviously had horrendous mistakes come very much public. And I can just imagine Whitehall ministers and civil servants going, oh my word, if we give them more power, look what might happen. We might get another Liverpool. But the problem is, though, you'll also get the vast majority will do a much better job with more power, because local government is probably the best arm of government, if we're being brutally honest. I know we would say that. But does that have to be a mindset we have to change? That actually you've got to give them the freedom to fail and succeed?
Well, I think it's really dangerous. Sorry, Liz. I think it's really dangerous to be making decisions based on the worst.
Yeah.
What we should be looking at is looking at the best practice and making decisions and aspire to be better. And it was actually, I'm a chair of governors, and it was a head teacher who said that to me a few years ago, and I took it on board. Never make a decision based on the worst behaviour or the worst option, because it will always be the wrong one. And I think that perhaps government need to think about that, is don't make the decision based on the worst performing councils.
Yeah. Look
at what can be achieved.
But I think this is a government that really does not understand about localism at all. And we as Liberal Democrats, we have that running through our DNA. I mean, we really do believe that, people are competent, people are able to make decisions for themselves. And I think it's really quite insulting to say that only MPs have got the skills to be able to do the things that run the country. It is quite remarkable, actually. In fact, I've had some conversations with a few MPs recently, which would give me exactly the opposite impression, especially some of the Tories. But no, I think we've made some changes in the council now to the way in which, for example, we do scrutiny, because we want proper scrutiny. We want the cabinet to be scrutinised because we want to be held to a high standard. Mm-hmm. And I don't think all councils do that by any means. Oh no,
we're not allowed. See, this is the perfect example. As a backbencher in Lancashire, we've made a big fuss. We are not allowed any scrutiny of cabinet decisions.
That's extraordinary, and that's the problem that actually you're up against. If you're, a lot of these Tory-run councils actually believe in holding on to the scrutiny process for themselves. So we've actually shocked them to death by saying, no, we'll have the opposition members chairing the scrutiny committees, and that's gone through now. And we're now training everybody. Nobody is going to be allowed to sit on a scrutiny committee without training. Mm. Every single member has to be trained if they want to be on a scrutiny committee, because we need to do it properly. We need to demonstrate that we are open and transparent, and that we can, if we do make mistakes, we can take that and we can do better.
Plus,
that's so important.
It stress tests all your ideas. And so what I don't get about things like the Tories in Lancashire was that if I was to cause a huge hullabaloo about a particular issue, people wouldn't care about the hullabaloo as long as they come to a right decision at the end. That's what matters. So they're not. But if they got it wrong, which a lack of scrutiny, and to kind of illustrate your point, in Lancashire, the Tory chief whip is also their head of scrutiny. That's how utterly ridiculous some of these functions can be. So no, that's brilliant. I'm glad to see we do slightly better.
Yes.
And our scrutiny, one of the things that we've changed or that I've asked to be changed straight away is our scrutiny is always reactive and always has been. It looks at everything that's happened. So this year I've asked for the budget that it goes to scrutiny. First, scrutiny should be feeding into the budget, not just looking at what Cabinet's already decided.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that is also going to help us when we come to the budget setting meetings, because everybody then has been able to feed in. Yeah, not everyone's going to get what they want because that's not happened, but at least everybody will have had a say or had the chance to have a say.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing as well this time. We've got a programme, in fact, of meetings where groups can look at the budget, discuss the budget. Obviously, at the end of the day, the Cabinet will set the budget, but we want feedback from everybody before we actually put it into tablets of stone. But what we are, I think I said this earlier, is we're revising the corporate plan first, and that's going to be the sort of, everything can be measured against our corporate plan. Mm-hmm. So that when we go to people and say this is what we want to do this is what we can afford to do, then they can sort of look at the corporate plan and say, well, how does that fit with that, and how are we going to measure your success? And actually that's the other thing. I think it's having an attitude towards how do we create the best outcomes for people living in, well, in my case, Oxfordshire, but anywhere in Durham, wherever. What are we actually trying to achieve here? And quite a lot of what I've seen, and I chair the Health and Wellbeing Board. And my first meeting, I looked at the agenda and I thought, this looks really boring. It was just a whole lot of PowerPoint presentations. What are we doing sitting together talking about this stuff that really isn't relevant? So we've got a workshop happening in a couple of weeks' time. Before we get to the next meeting, we're going to have decided what our outcomes are going to be and how we're going to measure those outcomes as a group with the health service and with our adult and children's social care people. Because if we don't have that as our guiding light, if you like, if we haven't got something to work towards, what's the point of what we're doing? We have to know what we're aiming to do. And it's not just us as a Cabinet that need to have that. Everybody needs to be focused on the things that we're trying to achieve, including some of these outside bodies as well. So we're trying to create a culture where, we start by thinking, what do we want to achieve here? And how are we going to do it? What steps do we need to take to get there?
I'm very curious to how you guys, as we start to wind up this conversation, is how you guys campaign going forward. Because I mean, you mentioned the dreaded coalition previously. I mean, I was very lucky. I was elected twice during coalition, which was an interesting time for anyone trying to stand for as a Lib Dem. But obviously, you guys are both in alliances and agreements with other parties. Mm-hmm. Now, the general rule of thumb is the minority party gets punished. Now, Liz, in your case, you're the majority party, and Amanda, your case is just so out of the box. I don't even know. There's probably no case law that will deal with it. So, how are you guys doing in terms of campaigning while having those good relationship with your partners? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Just start with you, Liz.
Well, that's going to be a really interesting test in May, actually, because a lot of the districts, not all of them, but a lot of them, and the City Council are up in thirds. Yeah. So we have elections in May, so that there's going to be a stress test put on us then, and especially in Oxford City, because there's a real battle in some of those wards between Labour and the Lib Dems. And I think it's very hard to know how that's going to pan out, actually. I think we have to be very careful about how we do it. At the moment, I mean, I've got a leaflet sitting in my car, 6,000 of them ready to distribute, which are about how we're working together. Mm. And I don't know how we're going to manage that, but I'm very pleased to say that we have Neil Fawcett on our team, and he's the guy that writes the leaflets, so I'm sure he'll find a way around it.
Amanda?
Yeah, we're very much keep to the community politics within your ward. As a joint administration, we have got someone who is one of the independents who does press releases for the administration. So that takes the politics out of it. But also, from our perspective, we've got a cabinet of 10. 3 of them are Lib Dems, and 2 of them have portfolios that are probably the most outgoing portfolios ever. So there is so much press coverage and coverage that we can get out. So one's climate change and all the neighbourhood services, and the other one is regeneration, culture, tourism and sport. So that, honestly, if Elizabeth's in the paper once a week, she's in 5 times a week. So there can't be anyone in County Durham who doesn't know who she is at the moment. But it's keeping true to what Lib Dems do. So we've all put our focuses out. Tomorrow morning, this is my week's holiday, I'm going door knocking. We're doing a street a week in our own wards. I still, on a Monday morning, I don't do council work on a Monday morning. I still cook the old people's pension, the pensioners' lunch in my ward every Monday at the church, because we have to be saying it takes an awful long time to get to the top, but you can be back down. And if we forget the people who put us there, then we do it at our peril. And that's what we've seen happen to the people who are now in opposition. They took for granted the fact they would get the vote, and you can't take that for granted. So yeah, it is slightly different. We're not quite as attacky as we were on the people we're in coalition with, or in joint administration, because again, I don't use that coalition word, because the Labour Party use it at every opportunity that they can. Yeah. And in our case, they always say the Tory-led coalition.
Do they?
Yeah.
That's been going on for ages.
But to be honest, people are just not biting. So let's say, but we have got 4 years before we have elections.
And who knows? I mean, who could have predicted what's happened in the last year, let alone in 4 years? So I suppose our message to all Lib Dems out there is keep fighting for what you believe in, because you never know, you might be running the county at some point. But also just, the principles we stand by, we're Lib Dems for a reason, and actually taking that into local government to making a difference, whether you are on your own, there's just 2 of you, or leading a group, that Liberal voice is really important. And I mean, loads of people have listened and watched this and actually been inspired by what you guys have said. Really, it's been brilliant. It's been excellent to have you on. And like I say, I'd love to. I mean, if there is any issues whatsoever that come in the future, you have an open ticket to come back onto the podcast, because we'd love to hear. Because it's majorities are easy. You guys are doing the real work. But no, a pleasure having you both on. Thank you so much, and all the best. Do enjoy your 1 day off you've had this year when it comes up. But in the meantime, everyone, if you are watching and liking this, please make sure you subscribe to the Lib Dem Podcast on wherever you get the podcast, or like us and subscribe on YouTube and Facebook. We also have a Patreon account. If anyone wants to sign up, get some bonus content, help out the show that way, please do. That's at patreon.com/LibDemPod. Thank you so much again to Liz and Amanda. You've been absolutely brilliant. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll be back with another episode very soon.